Good morning, boys and girls. We are going to be starting a new science unit today. And from now on, we have these books that we are going to be working through, kind of like we do for our history videos, where I will present my screen and you can follow along that way. So with the animal one, it was a little different. We were pulling from lots of different places. But now it's really a lot more simple. We've got one set of books that we're going to be working through, and you'll be taking notes on ecosystems. So what do you already know about ecosystems, the places where organisms live? You might remember already from previous years learning about different areas of the world and some of the different environments that animals live in, and based on our previous conversation about the different classifications of vertebrates, we know that certain animals live in different environments depending on whether they're warm-blooded or cold-blooded. It can somewhat depend on what type of temperature they need to be in, or if they need to be in an aquatic environment, or if they're terrestrial, they need to live on land. So we're going to take a look at the parts of an ecosystem. And I'm going to present my screen so that you can follow along with my book on the parts of an ecosystem. All right, so imagine that you are a frog living at a pond. Flies, lily pads, and water are part of your environment. An environment is all the physical things and conditions that surround a living thing. So our environment around us is all of those physical things that we are around, but also conditions, like what the weather is like around us. All the living and non-living things that are in one place make up an ecosystem. Now, a pond is a freshwater ecosystem. It has living things or organisms, such as animals and plants. We learned about that in our last unit, right? Now, organisms are not just animals, those invertebrates and vertebrates that we've learned about. Also, that includes plants. But can you think of some non-living things that might be in a pond? Think of anything that's non-living, like water. Water is not living, but that's part of the environment. It's part of the ecosystem. So the living things in an ecosystem, living things, are called biotic factors. Can you say biotic? Biotic means living. Comes from actually a Greek word bios, which means live or life. Now the pond also has some non-living things, such as water, sunlight, soil, and air. All of those things are factors that live around this duck that we're talking about. All of those affect the way that the living organisms can grow and live. Like the duck needs to have water. Plants need that sunlight and soil and air and water as well. Now, all the non-living things in an ecosystem are called abiotic factors. Abiotic means not living. Now, an ecosystem also includes the interactions among biotic and abiotic factors. How do they relate to each other? When things interact, they affect one another. For example, beavers interact with water, land, and plants when they build dams. So when a beaver is building a dam, they are they're stopping water flow, because the water stops where it's dammed up so that it creates kind of this barrier, which goes along with what you're talking about in history, actually. And it's also affecting the plants, both the ones that are being used for the dam itself, but also in the areas around it. Now, an ecosystem is a kind of system. Now, a system in general, that word, system, is a group of parts that work together, forming a whole. Okay? So a system, you can do this with me, is a group of parts working together to form a whole. There is a balance among the factors in an ecosystem. Now, what happens when one factor changes? Imagine if there's a forest fire. Sadly, there's a lot of forest fires happening around California and Oregon. So if there's a forest fire, does that change things for the animals? It does. What happens if there is a flood or a drought, not enough rain? Both of those things are also going to affect the plants and animals who live in that ecosystem. One ecosystem can support a great variety or diversity. Diversity is like that word variety, lots of different things, of organisms. Scientists often use these three words to talk about the organisms in an ecosystem. Okay? One of the words is species. Can you say species? Now, species are organisms of the same kind. Like mallard ducks are one species of birds. Great blue herons are another. So are all birds one species? No, it's more precise and a smaller group than that. All mallard ducks are one species. Blue herons, great blue herons, that's another species. So it's one specific part of that classification that we talked about in our last unit. Now, population is the next word, population. All the members of one species living in one place make up a population. A pond may be home to a population of 12 painted turtles. So the painted turtle, that's the species. The population is a bunch of painted turtles, all in a little population, like a family. So there's one, maybe species that we're talking about here, and then a bunch of them together make one population. Next word, community. Now, all the different populations living together in one place make up a community. A pond community can include populations of many different species of animals and plants. Can you think of some? You already heard of some examples that could be part of our community. Heard about, there could be mallard ducks. Maybe there's a population of lots of different mallard ducks. And then there's a population of some frogs, population of fish living at that pond. So the community is all of those other groups, different species living in the same place. Okay, now question for you before we, oh, that's fancy, I hadn't seen that. It's kind of cool how we flip the page. What are the two kinds of factors in an ecosystem? Do you remember what they are? Living and non-living, or do you remember the specific scientific name for it? Biotic and abiotic. Let's take a look here. Here they are, biotic and abiotic. Okay. What would be an example of each? Another question about that. What is a biotic or living factor? You could say any animal would be a biotic factor, or any plant. Now, what's an abiotic factor? Water, soil, sunlight, air, all of those would be abiotic. Those are not living. Okay, so those are the first couple pages of the parts of an ecosystem. I'm going to have this posted in Bright Thinker so that as we are learning about this, just like I have a history reader posted in Bright Thinker, you can go back at various times if you wanted to look at something again. And that is the beginning of our new unit. So it's really going to go along with what we talked about with the different groups, classifications of vertebrates. And now we're thinking kind of about where those vertebrates live and how they interact with each other and how do they interact with abiotic factors. That is all for today. I'm going to have some notes for you to take tomorrow over these pages as well, and I will talk to you later. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.